Welcome back, guys, to Nuno Solutions. I'm Nuno, and in this video, I'm going to show you guys how we can create a data layer for your WPF application. So to start, we're looking at Visual Studio 2022. So go into your Solution Explorer, right-click your project, and then go to Add and click New Folder, and you're going to call this a Data folder. This is where we're going to put our AppDB context for our Entity Framework class that we're going to be creating. And so let's right-click this. We're going to do an add, and let's add a new class called Nuno Solutions DB. Okay, and then we're gonna make it inherit from the standard Entity Framework base class DB context, right? And if you press Control period on your keyboard, and then it's gonna automatically give you a suggestion on how to resolve this issue because it's not detecting what class this is. So just click. I'm gonna use the Microsoft Entity Framework core. So I'm gonna say find and install the latest. And you'll see that the class that I'm inheriting from turned green, which means it's now detected. I'm gonna press Control D so that it auto formats my code. I'm also gonna change the modifier here from internal to public, right? And then scroll down. And now the next step is I wanna tell the DB class which database to connect to. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna override the onConfiguring. And you can see it tells us, pops it up for us. It's this one here. Just double click on it. It gives it to you. It auto creates it for you. Let me just unpin this so you can see the whole thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete the line that's here. And I'm going to actually use the options builder parameter that's given to us. And we're going to paste it in here. And we're going to say use SQL server. Obviously, you see that there is no, this method is actually an extension method that's not built into the DB context option builder, which is this class right here. So to do this, you actually have to add a package called Microsoft.EntityFramework.SQL Server. Go to your Solution Explorer here, right click your solution, and then go to Manage NuGet Packages. Then click Browse. Click search and then click, and then what you want to type in is Microsoft.EntityFramework.SQL. Okay, so if you type that in correctly and press enter, you're going to get this Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server package, NuGet package. Click install. When that prompts, just click accept. Once that finishes installing, you can close the NuGet package manager, go back into your Nuno Solutions DB. And now, if you go into where your options builder.use SQL Server and press Control period, make sure you spell it correctly, of course. Use SQL Server. There it is. You now have a method here that takes in a string. The string is a connection string to a database. At the end of the day, what we're going to be connecting to, I'm going to pull up SQL Manager Studio. We're going to be connecting to my SQL Express instance, right? It's running on my computer. We're going to point it to the Nuno temp DB. We're going to eventually what we're going to do is we're going to be fetching data and updating data from this employees table, which has a couple columns: emp ID, emp name, emp phone, emp email, a created date, and an updated date. The created date is automatically populated using a default value, and the updated date is nullable. So in this table, right now I have 7 records, as you can see on my screen here. So let's minimize that. And let's start creating our connection string. So you're going to type in here, server equals, you're going to say dot// dot basically means to connect to my computer. If I type my computer name in here, it's the equivalent of that. // this is really just slash, but you need to use another slash to escape this character. And you're going to type in SQL Express. I'm running this database on the SQL Express instance of SQL Server, semicolon. And now we're going to tell it the database we want to connect to. So you type in database equals, and I'm going to say Nuno temp. And then what you're going to want to do is put a semicolon here. And then the next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to tell it to use integrated security equals true. And all that does is it tells it to use the Windows identity or Windows context of that I'm logged into right now. So right now I'm logged into as myself. And I have access to the database already because I'm an admin on the database. So when the application establishes a connection to the database, it will use my Nuno account that I'm logged in as to establish that connection. Save that. Let's go back into SQL Server Management Studio. What we need to do now is basically generate a class that we can use for Entity Framework from this employees table. So I'm going to create a new query here. I actually have another video where I show you how to do this, but I have a script that it's called table to C# class. If you, I'll put the link in the description at the bottom of this video to the video, but it's a video called Code Snippets Table to C#. In that link, you'll be able to get a copy of this code. But basically, all you do in this code is you just change the table name to what you want. I'm gonna change this to employees, and you just execute, and it generates a C# class for you, basically, as you can see here. I'm just gonna copy that, go back into my Visual Studio. And then I'm going to go into Solution Explorer. I'm going to go into the data. I'm going to create a new folder called Data Models inside my data folder. And then I'm going to right click my Data Models folder. I'm going to click Add. I'm going to add a new class, which I'm going to call Employees. Now I'm just going to replace this Employees class with the class that was given to me from my automatic table to C# class script that I ran in SQL Server. And you can see here, now we have an employees class, and it has all the properties that we need that relate to the columns in the table. So, but we're missing a couple of things in here. So in order to make this an entity framework class that'll actually work properly, number one, we have to give it a key. And we're going to emp ID is the key. If you go into SQL Server Management Studio, you can see emp ID is actually the key of the employees table. So you can see there's little squiggly lines underneath this attribute. So you could either click this little light bulb, right? And then just, it pretty much knows which namespace you need to make this work. And you can just click this using system.component.model.data notations. Or the other thing is, if you click here and I press Control period, it kind of does the same. It mimics you clicking on this little light bulb. Then just double click on the using statement. You'll see that at the top of the class right here, it adds a using system.component.model.data notations. That way, the key attribute is recognizable by Visual Studio, so there's no errors. Similarly, we're gonna have to declare this class, right? This employees class as a table using the table attribute. And you're going to use this parentheses with it, and you're going to pass in a string. The string that you're passing in is going to be the name of the actual table. So if you go into SQL Management Studio, the name of the table is employees, with it's plural with an S. So you're going to type in here employees. And again, we have the same problem, squiggly lines. Just press Control period on your keyboard. And then the suggestion is to use system.componentModel.DataNotations.schema. So double click on that. You'll see that it adds it to the top of your code file, and then the squiggly lines go away. If you see it turning green, that means that it's recognizing it and you're good to go. Save that. And now let's go back into our Nuno Solutions database file. So Nuno Solutions DB, which is our database context class. And what we're going to do in here, we're going to have to add in our employee property as a DB set. So let's do that. Let me just like move left a little bit here. All right, add some space here. We're going to say public, and we're going to say DB set. This is an entity framework class that it's a generic that takes another class, which is typically a class that has the table structure that relates to the table in your database. So in here, I'm going to say employee. Doesn't know what it is because the namespace is different. Again, press Control period, and it's actually not giving it to me. Why is it not giving it to me? Let's go back into the class. So in .NET, right, when you create a class, you're not going to name it a plural name. You're going to name it a singular name. So let's get rid of that S, and we're going to save this. This is why we pass in this table attribute and give it a name, so that this basically is a way to map your employee class to the employees table, right? That's what all this is. Let's go back into the database context class called Nuno Solutions DB. And now that you still have squiggly lines, because the namespace, if you look here, the namespace of this class is Nuno Solutions.wpf.data.data models, but the namespace of the database class or database context is different, right? So let's just click here and press Control period, and then double click on this suggestion that Visual Studio is automatically giving us, which it basically is adding the namespace Nuno Solutions.wpf.data.data models to the top of your code file and makes the squiggly lines go away. Now we're going to name this property employees, and I'm just going to press tab. Visual Studio pretty much predicts that you're adding a property in here. We're going to hit save. And so now we have a database class, we have a connection to the database, we have the employee class that basically gives us a way to fetch data from the database. So let's go into our C#, the main window, .xaml.cs, and we're going to create a new method in here called void get employees. And now in this method, we're going to instantiate the Nuno Solutions DB context class, and we're going to fetch from the employees table, and then we're going to data bind the data that's returned to our data grid. So to do that, we're going to say var db is our variable name that we're going to use equals new Nuno Solutions DB. Again, we don't have that. The namespace of this window is Nuno Solutions.wpf, but the namespace of Nuno Solutions DB is Nuno Solutions.wpf.data. You can actually copy this and just go into your main window, to the top of this main window, and at the top here, you can literally just do using and paste that namespace, put a semicolon, save it, and now when you go back down to your get employees, I think I spelled it wrong. Let's see, Nuno Solutions, missing an S. There you go. Now you'll see that it finds it, but I just want to prove. So if I remove this using statement, save, you'll see that you get squiggly lines. It'll give you an error. Actually, if you go into your error list here, you'll see that the type or namespace name Nuno Solutions DB could not be found. Visual Studio doesn't know where this class is, so it doesn't know how to instantiate it. Again, so you could click on this and then press Control period. It'll give you a suggestion of what namespace to use because it found a class with this name in this namespace. And then you can just double click on it, and then it turns green and squiggly lines go away because the using statement got added to the top of your file right up here. So now the next step is we got to fetch the actual employee data. To do that, well, number one, let's first at the top of the code, let me just minimize these methods here. And at the top of the code, I'm actually going to declare actually, let's do binding list. Press Control period, and then it's going to want to use the system.component model. Press Enter, and now your binding list is located. Do the same thing for the employee class. It's going to use the Nuno Solutions WPF data models. And now we're declaring basically a binding list of employees, and we're going to give it an employee's name. And what you get, Visual Studio is pretty much predicting what I want to do. I want to instantiate a new binding list of employees. Boom, there we go. Save it. Go back to our method here. So now what we're going to say is employees equals bb dot, and we're going to pull from the employees list, and we're going to say dot to list. We're getting a squiggly line here because, okay, so let's just use list, and I'll show you what I mean. Oh, one other thing. I don't think we renamed the data grid. So let's go back into the main Windows XAML file. Click on the data grid here, press F4, and let's just name this. Call it DG for data grid, and then emps. Go back and then save it. Go back into your C# class. We're gonna actually set the item source property of the data grid. So the DG emps, which is the emps data grid dot items source. We're gonna set this to the employees list that we're pulling from the database. This method, get employees, we're going to call this from the button click event. The button that I'm talking about is the btn get employees. So let's just paste that in there, get employees, and then let's just save this. Let's run this and see what we get. It compiles and there's no errors. Great. So we're going to hit get employees, and you can see we were able to successfully fetch a list of employees. So now we have the data grid pulling data, and we're showing that data in the data grid. So thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Thank you. Bye.